Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about some more advanced volume shading and some techniques that may come in handy when doing volume rendering. And I'm going to be using this example from week 3 that has fire on it. And what we need to do is we need to render this volume and use this temperature field to create interesting lighting. And what we can get from that, if we have geometry for example, we can get interactive lighting from the temperature into the geometry, and we also need to get scattering, multi-scattering, where this field itself is affecting the volume. Now to do this, it's very simple. In Houdini we just need to use a geometry light and tell it to use a volume, but it can get really expensive if you have complex volume, and the result is not very interesting. And I'm going to propose an idea that may or may not work. It's just a prototype or an R&D, something that I was researching to create fake multi-scattering from volume. And I'm going to show you the geometry light using volume for interactive geometry, for interactive lighting. So I have the volume here, and I have the statue. Okay, let's dive inside, and I have a visualization node that takes in the temperature field, remaps it, and this is what we have. Let's load in the LUT in the viewport, it helps as well. So this is the volume, and I'm going to remap this between 0 and 10. And maybe 0 to 5. And let's say that's our temperature field. Okay. I also added a second light, basically opposite to the sunlight that we have, that I'm going to be using. So let's set up something very simple, and delete this. Okay, so I'm going to hide this, and in the volume shading I copied, actually let's delete this. I'm going to copy the volume that we created before, and I'm just gonna increase the density to 3 and 3. I'm gonna set the color to white, and let's go and set in, copy this this pass, and let's set a few objects. So we need the volume statue and the forced matte. We're going to use grid 1, grid 2. I think I have another grid. Yeah, grid 2 with a different shader. Just it's not white. And for the lights I just need sun 1 and sun 2. I also have a new camera that frames it like that. I'm gonna lower the resolution to 960 by 540. Okay, this is what we get. Cool. I'm gonna remove this grid because it's casting shadows. I don't want that. I want the light that is pointing from the bottom up to also hit the volume to get some more, yeah, something like that. And I think the density is too high, so I'm gonna lower that to 1. Actually, let's lower it to 0.5 on both. And let's go back. I'm gonna make a copy of this, have it on the side. I'll bring it back when needed. Okay, cool. So now it's very transparent. Let's go set it to 1, and I think we should be good. Cool. So let's see how to read in that fire temperature, the temperature field, and use it here. We have this emission field. Let's set it to have something like this. Okay, let's hit render, see what we get. So right now it's emitting uniformly on the entire volume. We don't want that. We want to limit this emission to only to where we have temperature only. So the way to import fields into the shader is the same way we do with attributes, using the bind node. And I'm going to simply import the temperature and connect it to the emission. See how this option is not visible here? But that's where we connect in extra channel. We can use this scale as well and plug in a multiplier, but this way we have we're not losing this control, so we still have these two guys to control our field. Cool, so you can see now the emission is controlled, and we did some remapping in SOPs to visualize it like this. Let's go back. So the value was between 0 and 5. Let's go to the shader. I'm going to put down a fit range. And let's increase this to 5. See what we get. Okay, so nothing changed. Let's try this here. Let's add a multiply by a constant. Maybe the emission, it should work. But let's see. Let's do this and see what we get, because I didn't see any difference between these two. And let me make sure that the shader is assigned. Yeah, it is assigned. Okay, so it looks like this field was not being used for some reason. This guy here. So we're just going to use to connect to the scale and have our multiplier here. And see, now we have temperature where we wanted to. But right now the color is just this. And we can use the Pyro Blackbody shader that generates a color for us. So let's do a quick test with this, and then I will show you another way of doing it. So the temperature value, sorry, the field value is this, and physical color, I'm going to connect that there, and let's hit render. And this should read in the float value and knows how to generate a color based on that. So it looks like it's two. Let's try 5. We may have to add another multiplier just for this field, for this node to work. If you see this coming and you don't see me hitting the render button, it's because I'm using it from the right screen. Okay, so it's working. Let's go back again. This Pyro shader expects the input to have higher values than what we have currently, because temperature generally goes really high. So let's try multiply this by 10 and see what we get. And remember, we also have a LUT that may affect the look of the volume. So it's pure white now. Let's try 5. And as you can see, it's not working. Maybe I'm not using it the right way, but I personally don't like this Blackbody idea. I like to control the colors by hand like we do in SOPs. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to create a ramp, And basically where we have black, I'm going to specify what color I want. When we have white, I'm going to specify what color I want. And let's try and use the IPR for this case. Let's go here. I'm going to add a few, something like that, so I know I can select it easily in the list. It's there. Okay, and let's go to the matte, type render. So let's see. So let's try and use this instead. Okay. Let's change this to have a red color to know that we have something working. Yeah, it's working. Let's connect it. Connect this guy here. Cool. And I'm going to set this to blue, sorry, green, blue, and red. Just have 3 colors, and I want to squeeze the range of the temperature. We're going to do it at this frame, so it may not work for the entire sequence, but I want to see the 3 values. And let's lower the density so we can easily see the temperature field. Cool. Let's set this to 10. Okay, as you can see now, we're not getting the red, green, and blue clearly. So I want to change this. I want to work on the remap to squeeze out more information. Cool. I'm going to set this there as well. I don't want the multiplier. Okay, so we have the blue. Yeah, I think we have the 3 values now. I like this better. And what we can do is we can add a ramp, a float ramp. Where is the float? There used to be a float option. What's happening? Oh, I know why. Yeah. So let's. I want to use this. I want to add another ramp to remap this even further. So let's connect this here. Let's connect this here. And let's connect this here. Set this to 5. And let's go back up. See why the UI is not working. In theory, we should get this at the upper level. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. I'm going to move this to the side to remove any low value temperature, something like that. Cool. And it looks like we had some issues with the UI. That's why we're not seeing the red, green, and blue. But it's okay. I'm going to use this ramp for now. I'm going to set this to have a yellow tint. This one to have white. And this one to have a red color. And you can see we're getting some fire now. I want to play with this color. I'm missing another tone. I'd like to add another orange color, something like that. And this has, I want this to have more red on it. Yep. So something like this, and let's give this more yellow as well. Okay, let's hit render. Cool, yeah, better ramp, and we can definitely work on this a bit more. So let's set this back to 1:1 for to get some density, and that's our temperature field. Rendering. Let's increase it a bit more, 10, 50, and I think we're clamping these values a bit, but it's okay for now. So what I want to show now is how to get interactive lighting from this into the volume. So I'm gonna go back up, at least the default workflow, and volume statue beauty. I want to call this illum for illumination, and I don't want any light. The light is going to be coming from the volume, and let's go to the object level, and I'm going to create a light. I'm going to call this volume illum, and this light I'm going to change it to geometry and go under the area light option. I'm going to drag the volume statue, and under the material I'm going to copy this and paste this here. Okay, I'm going to leave everything as the default, and let's go back and make sure we use that light, and let's change this back to our node. Let's hit render and see what we get. Now we don't have any lights except this one, except the volume lighting, and boom, we have interactive lighting affecting the volume, which is very, very, very cool. And this is how you would get, how you create fire, which is looking like very cool fire already. So let's go back. I want to turn these lights back on, but I want to lower them. I don't want them to be very present in the scene, and I want the light to be the source to be the focus. Okay. So, not to confuse multi-scattering with interactive lighting, we are not getting any multi-scattering within the volume. The rays are not bouncing back and forth. We're only getting illumination from this source into the volume. There is no multi-scattering happening, which is something very very different in terms of visual. Let me increase these lights a bit, maybe 1. .7, strike 0.3. I'm actually going to change this to have a darker tone, an orange tone as well, something like that. And to get multi-scattering to work properly, we need to go under the rendering tab, under limits, volume limits, and set this to 1. And this is where the render time is going to increase drastically. You can see the result has changed, and now we're getting interactive lighting from multi-scattering in the volume. Let me remove these two guys, put them in the exclude list, because I don't want them in this pass. I just want to see this causing multi-scattering. That's where most of the visual is going to come from. Let's set this to 0, and you can see it's the first pass, and this is with 1 illumination 1 bounce. And you can see how the light is bleeding through, which is very, very cool. Now I have an idea that you can definitely use this. You just have to wait for the render. Let's see how it's going to look like. You just have to sit and wait for the render, which is going to be slow, unfortunately. So what I'm going to show is an idea. It's not a workflow by any means. I want to show you how you can create extra fields and stops and use them in the shader to do further, to create anything basically. Anything using these techniques. Let's do 1.1. There is a visual difference between this render view and mplay when you use a LUT, or even if you don't use a LUT. So I generally set the gamma to 1.1 here to get the result similar to this. Cool. So I'm gonna let this run, and what I want to do is I'm gonna it's a bit slow to visualize here, but let's give it a try. And what I want to do is basically the multi-scattering. What it does is it takes in the temperature field and generate a lighting source from it, which will bounce inside the volume multiple times, and we get some cool color bleeding from the temperature field into the rest of the volume. And my idea is to take the temperature field itself and blur it like 10 times so that it bleeds in, it gets blurred and bleeds in into the surrounding. And then we rename that temperature field into, let's say, scatter or fake scatter, and use it in the shader to add some extra visual that fakes in the multi-scattering idea. So this is the result, and you can see it's very noisy. So it's totally up to you guys how you want to approach this. The easiest way to solve this is to increase it to 6 by 6 and keep increasing it until it goes away, and this is generally slow, to be honest. So let me show you the idea. I'm going to use a node called VDB Smooth, and here I'm going to set it to only affect the temperature, and let's take a look. So I set the filter voxel to 8. That means we're affecting 8 voxels at a time, and it's repeating this operation 10 times. This will also change the temperature value. If it goes between 0 and 10, it's gonna blur it, and the value will get averaged and lower. And as you can see, it's more inside the volume now. We've lost the outer layer, which is very, very interesting. You can see we're getting some cool lighting information from this pass. So let's see how we can utilize this. Now what I want to do is I want to get the temperature field from this. I'm simply going to remove it, isolate it, and we can't have two fields with the same name. I mean, we can, but it's not gonna work properly. And sorry about this, I'm not sure what's happening with the graphic cards. It's been giving me these issues. So let's rename this field from temperature to, let's say, scatter. Okay, and we've done that. So let's merge it back with this. I'm going to disable this node, I don't need it. Cool. And we've added this the temperature field on top of this. Let me change the viewport. Now before I dive into this, I want to show how to how we can get interactive lighting onto geometry. So I'm going to create a separate pass for this quickly, and volume illum onto geo. It's the same approach. There is nothing special on geo. Okay, I'm going to use the volume illum as a light source. I don't need these guys, and I need the ground to be visible, which is great too. And let's hit render, and this should give us the interactive lighting between the explosion and the ground. And this pass, unfortunately, I don't have any other ways to fake it. Let's see. Yeah, so the object is quite dark, that's why. Let me add in the explosion as well as forced phantom. Okay, and I'm gonna change the color. I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna change it to white so it captures as much light as possible. I'm gonna use the ground receiver geo. Okay. And here we have to increase the samples a lot to fix all this noise, and it's gonna be noisy. Cool. So at this value, it's not that bad, but yeah, that's the interactive lighting from the volume and to the geometry. Okay, cool. I'm gonna show a different. Let me take a note. I'm gonna show a way to reduce the noise by generating a new volume. Noise reduction. We'll do this in a separate video. Okay, so let's go back to this guy. We have now a new field called scatter. And I'm gonna copy all this, leave it there, and I'm gonna change this to scatter. Let's go here, hit render. And remember, we have interactive lighting turned on as well. Let's see what's going on. I don't need this. Okay. Volume statue. Yeah, I think the shader is failing for some reason. Delete this. It didn't like those nodes hanging, and they were affecting these two guys. Okay, so we have some lighting, and the idea, I don't want to use this as an interactive lighting source. So I'm gonna go back into this pass, I'm gonna copy it, I'm gonna turn off this volume illumination, and I want to just render it using this sun 1 and 2. Let's this name. Okay, let's hit render. I want to get a beauty pass of the volume with a scatter field just being rendered as normal. Okay, cool. You can see it's only there, so let's go back to the map. I'm going to copy this. I want to copy back the temperature later, and let's tweak it so we get something more interesting here. So first of all, I think this clamp is removing a lot of data. This ramp, yeah. Yep, so that's what I'm looking for. This data inside this volume. And I'm gonna lower this to 10. I don't want it to be too strong. And let's look at how we're getting this very, very cool field inside the volume. It has some interesting visual to it. It's adding a bleed to the overall volume, and trust me, this is really hard to create if you are to do it with a render and have a field that actually emits that light. And let's go back to these two guys. I'm gonna rename this so they don't conflict with the ones we have. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna combine everything. So I'm gonna use an add node, combine this with the previous one, because we don't want to lose our main temperature, we just want to add to it. And we have separate controls for the remap of each field if we wanted to. And let's change this to temperature. Cool. So we can tweak now this with the scatter with this turned on and balance it better. Cool. We can even add a hue shift to the ramp of this field and give it some more saturation if we wanted to. Sorry, not shift amount, this is the color. And what I would like to do, something like that. What I would like to do is see how the field is blurred here. I'm gonna go back to the object level, and remember we smoothed out the temperature as it is. I'm going to create a volume VOP and see how we're doing this remap to only get the temperature here. And we're doing this remap by clamping the temperature using a ramp. So we're going to do something similar to that and then blur the field. So let's do it. Do it now once I get the machine back. Okay. So volume VOP. We're going to import the temperature field, and we can do this using a bind node. Can import any field, temperature. I'm going to use a ramp, and it's a spline ramp, and then I'm going to export this again. Okay, let's go back up. Let's go to the viewport. Changing it to viewport and back will trigger the cooking of the volume. That's what I want. And basically we're clipping the temperature field now, which may require us to do some extra tweaking in the shader because it's different now. The coming data is different. Let me snap this, which is fine to do. I hope it's still there. Let's go to the mat. And it looks like something has happened to the field. Yeah, something happened to the field. But I think you guys got the idea. I wanted to remap. No, it's there. Yeah, it's working. It's just the remap, the clamping is very, very strong. I was aiming to get some data here, but it looks like it's only we've only kept the temperature field in this area, and that's where the blur is happening. And that's why we're getting this expansion in there. Okay. Cool. So let's go back and do a render with everything together. Also going to turn on the volume illumination on top of all of this, and that's fine. I'm going to increase the settings to 6x6. Set this to 10. Set this to 12. Volume quality to 2. And I think that's it. Let's do a render. See how it looks like. And basically what I was trying to show you guys is how you can render volume and get the temperature field or any field you want displayed in and rendered in Mantra, and then how you can process the volume in SOPs. The idea of the fake scattering is just to teach you guys how you can process field in SOPs and use them in the shader. It's not something physically accurate, and I think with a little bit of tweaking you can add some interesting visual to the volume that is really hard to build using using the renderer. The LUT is also changing the look of the volume quite a bit, and I really like to use it all the time unless I'm requested not to use it, but in all my renders I always have it on. It definitely helps to bring in more contrast in the image. Cool. So I'm gonna let this run, and then I think that's pretty much it for this week. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in a bit. Bye bye.